to keep everyone aware, there's some logistics around our forum this afternoon. We are joined by Ambassador Blanchard, who is the Canadian ambassador and permanent representative to the UN in New York. My name is Justin Philippi. I am one of the board members of CAIDP. I am also a professional engineer. I practice and I work for a private consulting engineering company, RJ Burnside International. We have a domestic operation of about 400 employees that mainly do civil and environmental engineering. I work in a smaller group that focuses on international, and my particular interest is on solar water pumping and trying to introduce solar water pumping as the main solution to solving the water problem across the developing world. So that's where my sort of passion is. So without any further ado, then I will introduce the panelists. So I'll start with Ayman Chowdhury. He is the head of secretariat at the Global Compact Network of Canada. So go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi everyone again. I think some of you were in the previous session, the morning session today, so I wouldn't actually be taking more time to reintroduce myself. But again, I'm Ayman Chowdhury for the one who is new in this room. And I'm the head of secretariat at Global Compact Network Canada, and Global Compact Network Canada is the Canadian chapter of United Nations Global Compact. And Ambassador Blanchard, it's very nice to see you again.
Nice. Well, I don't see you, but nice hearing you.
Thank you very much, Ayman. Our second panelist here with us in the room is Catherine M. Jenkins. She is the Chief Program Officer at WUSC, the World University Service of Canada.
Not a university. Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure to be here today and to speak on this panel on a topic that's a big personal and professional interest. And happy to be on this panel with the diverse and experienced co-panelists and moderator. And I'm very happy to see people of all generations have decided to spend their afternoon at the Youth Forum.
Thank you very much. And last but surely not least, we have Ambassador Blanchard. As I mentioned before, he's Canada's ambassador and permanent representative to the UN in New York. Ambassador Blanchard, could you introduce yourself as well as we discussed, talk a little bit about some of your ideas as to the changing landscape for development aid in the sector?
Well, thank you, Justin, and nice being on this panel with Ayman and Catherine, and thanks for everyone in the room. I don't see you, but I wish I was with you, and thanks to technology, I can actually partially be with you. Everything I say this afternoon, I'm not a traditional diplomat, and I'm not a traditional person at doing work in development. So it's probably, to some, I'll sound sometimes shocking and sometimes different than what you've heard before. So just bear with me a little bit. And just, I come from a background that is private. I mean, I studied in international relations and public international law and public administration. So my academic background is actually was very aligned with what I'm doing now. The issue is that for 25 years, I actually went into the private sector and was a lawyer in a big law firm in Canada, and then I became the chair and CEO of that law firm, which is McCarthy Tétrault, which is one of the national law firms in Canada. And I jumped into this job. I was a part of the appointments made by Prime Minister Trudeau in 2016, the first diplomatic appointment that he made with Washington, New York, and London. And I was part of that trio that we sent abroad. And I jumped from the private sector to the current posting that I have. When I arrived there at the UN, Ban Ki-moon said to me, at the time he was the Secretary General of the United Nations, well, Marc-André, I said to him, I said what Justin Trudeau always says when he's abroad, we're Canada and we're here to help, what can we do? And I said, Secretary General, I'm Canada and I'm here to help, what can I do? And he says, well, you have a very, very interesting background. It's very peculiar. It's very seldom that we have someone from the private sector at the UN. And he said, you know, maybe you can help us with the financing of the Agenda 2030 and the SDGs. And I was very happy by that discussion because I said, you know, first 5 minutes in my life, I talked to the Secretary General, I come out with a mandate. And I came back to the mission, and I came back to Global Affairs Canada and the people in international development in Canada. And they all said to me, you know, this is an impossible task. Actually, you know, you should not be taking that on. You should focus on something else, because at the UN, the private sector is a no-no, and you don't talk about private sector within the UN. Well, it was exactly what the Secretary General wanted me to change, as to try to help change the focus of the discussion. The focus of the discussion at the UN was very much on the overseas development assistance, the public development money that is approximately in the world. If you add all of the money that is focused on development by all donor countries, it's approximately $145 billion. And the needs for the SDGs are around, varies depending on how you calculate it, but in developing countries, it's approximately $3 trillion a year. So you know, here you have a focus at the UN at the time on 145 billions, but you need 3 trillion, which is $3,000 billion a year of investments. So the Secretary General said to me, Marc-André, if you could just help us changing the conversation from the focus on ODA to talk about all of the other partnerships that are, you know, and that are foreseen by at the Agenda 2030, and talk about the role of the private sector and how we can partner all together to get to the 3 billion, that would be 3 trillions. That would be very useful. So I started, despite all of the advice that I got, that I should do that. And you know what? Fast forward 3.5 years later, I was just a co-host at the UN and the co-facilitator last week of the high-level dialogue for financing for development, and we spent half the day with private sector people in the room about how they will, you know, partner with all sorts of other organizations to actually make sure that we move capital faster and more at scale in developing countries, and particularly in frontier markets. So we were able to change the discussion. For me, development assistance is necessary, is essential, and obviously I should be neutral in the campaign, but I think it's not a good idea to reduce it. I think Canada should increase its development assistance. But that is not the magic bullet to get to the 3 billion. It's only something that you use as a catalyst and as a leverage. And there are parts where the private sector will never go. You know, it's very difficult to convince the private sector to invest in the middle of a conflict somewhere, and depending on what the industry you're talking about. But there are some real market failures where actually public resources are needed. And also you need to, it's not only in development, it's not only the development assistance that is relevant, there's the money of the domestic mobilization, the tax collection in each country that is important. Also, you have the remittances that are very important. The remittances is the money sent by the diasporas abroad. Could you believe that that money is between 500 and 700 billion dollars a year? So it's way bigger. It's more than three times bigger than the development assistance. So if you reduce the cost, at the moment the cost of remittances is around 9%. If you reduce that to 2%, it's actually do the math. You have 7% of 500 billion that new money injected in developing in frontier markets. So this is very important that we achieve that. And then you have the money that is in the hands of the institutional players. You know, in Canada and in some other countries of the world, a lot of money is in the hands of the institutional players. Some people believe that $80 trillion are in the hands of the institutional players, like pension funds, insurance companies, and the likes, sovereign wealth fund. And we need to make sure that they understand that actually, you know what, it matters. The way that they invest their capital matters, that actually they need to make sure that their capital is slightly better aligned with sustainable development. And we see a huge movement in this at the moment. And then there's the entire debate that is in the background about capitalism. Capitalism, you know, when you have the first page of the front of the Financial Times 2-3 weeks ago, if you haven't seen it, just go and Google it. It was fantastic. It was saying, you know, basically, I forget exactly the words, but it was basically that capitalism needed a reset. And part of that reset is to make sure that, you know, we understand clearly that, you know, the biggest challenges to the world at the moment are what? Inequalities and climate change. And some may say cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is more of a problem that we can address more in the traditional way in some ways, in some aspect. But inequalities and climate change, what's the answer to these two biggest risks on the planet? In vast investments, massive investments in infrastructure. That's what needs to happen if we want to actually meet the objective of the Paris Accord, and if you want to meet the ambition of the SDGs. So the answer to these two things, massive investment in infrastructure. How do you get that? You need to get money from where it is. So basically to transfer money and make sure that pension funds and the likes, the institutional investors, put more money better aligned with that, you know, that aspiration than they do currently. And the good news is that it's happening on climate. It is happening on climate. It's not happening on the other stuff that are part of the SDGs as much. And some may say not at all. But we need to push that. And I'm one of the ones who say, you know, let's make sure that it's a success on climate. And then once they've tasted the taste of investing in those markets on climate, they're going to invest in the rest and of the SDGs. And what's needed to succeed for the infrastructure and the SDGs, it's all the things that Canadians are a champion of. You know, it's all about infrastructure, fintech, biotech, education, healthcare, water treatment, and the likes. And I could go on and on into what is needed. And so we just need people, young people like you, that come into play and actually are very audacious and ambitious about what Canada could do on the global stage. And I think, you know, there's a lots and lots of room for you know, people who want to get involved in development, providing that you don't take a traditional way of that. We are now not you know, of course, there's always going to be a space for development where you're going to deal a lot at the community level, and you're going to deal a lot with issues, social issues. But we cannot only, if we want to be relevant in the world, Canada as a country, we cannot only be relevant for the social issues. We need to be relevant for what is called the hard stuff, which is the infrastructure. And there's a development issue there. There's also a security issue. And, you know, another country of the world has understood that game very well, and it's called China. And there's a lot of criticism about the One Belt, One Road. I say to the people, fine, you could have your criticism, but the main point here is not, let's make sure that the West and countries like Canada, we offer alternatives to the Chinese option. At the moment, we are not offering an alternative because our institutions don't believe they have a role to play in this, but they do. And I tell them, you know, so for us, I come back to what I tell them, but for us, just at the point of China and the One Belt, One Road, to me, it's like there's a disruptor that came into the game. There's an Airbnb there, and there's an Uber. It's called China, and they came and they play by other rules, not the same rules as we play. For all sorts of good and bad reasons, we can. I'm not criticizing one way or another. That's not the point here. It's just they come and they have different rules. They see risk differently. They see opportunities differently, and they take a long-term view that we don't take in the West. But that means that their geopolitical influence has been growing. Why? Because they are now the major player in the world on infrastructure. And I'm saying, well, you know, we have to wake up in the West and be an alternative to that. I mean, China, we should partner with China where we can, but we should also offer an alternative option in many places, because that has a huge impact on the geopolitics. And we've seen that in many parts of the world at play. So there's a development issue, a security issue, and a big economic issue. And so for me, you know, with this definition of capitalism, the fact that the risks now are systemic, that the issues we're dealing with in the world are climate change and inequalities, and if we don't deal with them as a society, we're going to be challenged in many ways. And you know, the system will need, you know, to react. If not, you know, like I'm one of the ones who believe that capitalism needs to save itself because I don't think it's sustainable the way it's going now. And I'm a very pro-market kind of guy, but I believe that we need to make sure that capital is better aligned with sustainable development. And to finish on that, I think where Canada and Canadians have a big role to play is that we need young people like you to go, and that's why there's going to be many opportunities, because you know what happens in Africa is not like, to make the easy joke, it's not like what happens in Vegas. It doesn't stay in Africa. And it actually, you know, you look at what has happened in the Middle East and in some parts of Africa in the last 7 years. Just look at Afghanistan and Syria. 5 million people moved out of Afghanistan and Syria in the last 7 to 8 years. And what has happened? Well, Brexit has happened. There's a direct link between that and between the two events. And some may say with other events, but let's not get into, just take that one. That, don't tell me that the pension funds in Canada that say they only invest in safe markets like the UK, don't tell me that the value of their assets has not been diminished by the fact that of Brexit, and the Brexit that was caused by an event that happened in the Middle East. So my point is that was 5 million. Imagine if you have 50 million, like what some of the prognostics of the UN, that the migration that can be caused by climate change. So it's not capital, the money needs to wake up and look at risk differently and must see opportunities differently. And I'll finish on that. In China, like, it's interesting. If you take, you know, the newspapers from Los Angeles to Turkey to Istanbul, you know, Africa is on the front page of, well, I chose my generation, I refer to newspaper, but of the political section of newspapers. It's in the front page of as a continent in crisis. If you go from Istanbul to Shanghai, you know, it's actually Africa is on first page of the economic section as a huge opportunity, as where the 10 biggest, the fastest growing cities in the world will be in the next 20 years. And if we want, Canada wants to remain relevant, if we want to have opportunities for you and for my grandchildren, we need to actually be relevant in the game now. And we need to do things slightly differently than what we've been doing. And this is why, for example, Prime Minister Trudeau created an infrastructure hub in Toronto, and where we're going to work with, we're trying to work with countries to actually make sure that their projects can be bankable. Because what we found in my work at the UN is there's a lot of projects on one side, there's a lot of money on the other side. The problem is the link between the two. And that's what we need to work on. And so for me, for the future, for you, you know, anything that has in relation to infrastructure, anything that has to do, well, just a sec, I'm sorry, to do with infrastructure and fintech, healthcare, education, and water, engineering, and IT, obviously, is actually very, very useful and will play a big role. So I encourage you to look into this and to work towards this. I also encourage you, a lot of us in the traditional field in Canada, we've worked a lot on what I call the soft side of things. We will only be relevant in the world if we also work on the hard stuff, not only the softer side. And I think we're Canadians, we can easily do both. It's not a choice between the two. So that was the background I wanted to give you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Blanchard. Do either of you want to comment and have? Sure. Yeah. Does anyone have a specific question that they'd like to ask to Ambassador Blanchard on some of the topics that he just mentioned? Anyone feeling like they want to stand up and put their name? Okay, well, I might start out then with one. You mentioned that China is the Airbnb in the development and the aid sector, that they're the disruptor. Yet we hear in the midst of an election campaign right now, and I'm trying to keep this nonpartisan, but one of the platforms is to reduce Canada's aid budget by 25%. We're also in a world of ongoing austerity, where for the last almost 10 years we've been in limited additional funding and shrinking government budgets. So where can Canada stand, and how can Canada stand up and take a leading role against those two factors of needing to be more involved in the world stage, but perhaps facing budgetary, monetary, and other pressures that are limiting how far and how wide we can be active?
So, well, it's because you see the budget as being public money. It's not. We can bring way more. Let's look at climate change domestically in Canada. We have two banks, the the Royal Bank and TD Bank. They've announced that they will align $100 billion each, one before 2025 and the other before 2030, with lower CO2 emissions investments. That's way more than any public money can do domestically. Way more. And so what we need, and that's why your leadership and the leadership of people in the room is important in the private sector, because the money in our societies is in the private sector, in the hands of the private sector. Let's not forget that. The money in the public sector, in the government, the foreign aid money, is very important. I actually think it should be increased. The likelihood of that are rather slim. You know, it's not going to be increased in an amount that is, you know, like it's going to be increased, but not by.
We've just lost the audio connection to you, Ambassador. I don't know. In the meantime, if I can, I'll ask for some of your comments to some of the ideas that Mr. Blanchard, Ambassador Blanchard discussed.
Sure, I'll give some initial thoughts from my perspective. I think certainly I would agree with many of the issues and trends that Ambassador Blanchard highlighted in his comments, certainly in terms of the flows and also the of different resources, certainly the geopolitical disruption that we see on the global stage. We definitely see that affecting our work with young people around the world. What I would also agree that much like maybe the ambassador's critique of the UN, we could make a similar critique about the nonprofit sector, civil society being maybe cautious or apprehensive to engage with the private sector, and that's something that my organization we're trying to move away from, to become more comfortable, speaking to a business audience, to collaborate with the business community, and to align a little bit more. What I would add in terms of the focus on hard infrastructure would be that investment, that commensurate investment on the human capital side. Certainly that's the kind of work that we do as an organization. And I think in terms of the very well documented demographic challenge and opportunity that we see in places like sub-Saharan Africa, there's a real opportunity to prepare young people on the ground to be ready to take advantage of these flows that the ambassador was talking about. So those are some of my initial thoughts in terms of some of the high level topics, but over to you, Ayman.
Amazing. I think you have highlighted on some good points. And getting back to what Ambassador Blanchard has mentioned about all these great opportunities and the engagement that we can get from private sector, actively making them a part of this whole SDGs discussions. So when we were discussing about the whole agenda for this youth forum, this particular session, I think Justin, we discussed that we should be highlighting about some challenges, some opportunities that are out there, and some of the trends that probably the young professionals should be looking at just to prepare themselves better for the upcoming future. So I'm grateful to Ambassador Blanchard actually to making it a bit easier for us to develop that whole context, like where Canada is kind of moving towards and how the whole agenda towards sustainable development is shaping up. So I'm going to go further into that. Rather, I'm going to jump onto the main issues that we are here to discuss today. First, I'm going to highlight about the particular challenge the youths might face while kind of preparing themselves for the job of future. The first one is the disruptive effects of advances in automation and AI. Everyone knows that, like, okay, the future of work with the advancement of technology is going to change a lot. And if you look at the very recent McKinsey report, they have highlighted that 70% of the jobs will actually be changing in the next 4 or 5 years. 70% of the employees who are working right now, they'll be forced to shift their jobs in the next 4 to 5 years just because of this advancement of technology. And although there will be more adverse impact on the woman because of those all obvious reasons, because of all those other barriers, but the effect is going to be same for both men and women. And the challenge is going to be more particularly critical because of those other issues related to climate change, raising inequality, shifting demographics, migration pressure, urbanization, political backlash against globalizations. All those things will be just making this more and more complex. So if you are a young professional and if you are interested in working towards that international development phase, you need to kind of keep yourselves very updated about this whole geopolitical change, like about the climate change, about the migration movement, how your country, wherever you are interested in working, and how their political environment is shifting towards, and what are the other key SDG priorities do we see in those countries. You need to be very careful about that one. And in terms of some immediate jobs or the kind of skill sets we are actually looking into the young professionals who wants to apply for those development aids or to those developing nations where there is a need for sustainability professionals, there is a particular website that I can refer you to. The website is called sustainabledevelopment.un.org/partnerships/decent jobs for youth. That's the whole website link. And there are already some, I think, around 50 to 60 jobs already posted right now, and that job listing gets regularly updated. So if you want to work in the international development field, you can immediately check that website and see what are the kind of skill sets they're looking into. And the jobs that you will be seeing there, those are segregated based on the different SDGs that we have discussed since morning. Yes, definitely. Sorry, I don't have it on the screen, but I'll repeat it again. sustainabledevelopment.un.org/partnerships/decent job for youth. So this is a decent jobs for youth initiative from UN Global, I think from UN organization, not particularly from UN Global Compact. But if you go to this website, you'll see all those different jobs there. I strongly encourage you to definitely look and visit those jobs. And then there are actually few trends that you need to be very careful about, like how exactly is the job market is shifting. The first one is the poverty will become concentrated in conflicted and fragile area. So, and one particular benefit you actually have, there are 17 sustainable development goals. You can definitely master all 17 goals, but based on your particular background or based on your particular interest, the way we urge companies or private sector to prioritize their sustainable development goals, it is also very important for you to prioritize what are your SDGs. What SDGs do you want to be a champion for? That is very important. That is very critical. Need to kind of first see what are the different SDGs you want to prioritize for yourself, which are the SDGs you want to be a champion for, because SDGs, as we have discussed this morning, it has 17 goals, to 169 targets, around 700 indicators. This is a complex issue. And if you want to master in all, yes, feel free to encourage and feel very motivated to do so. But if you want to look at some short-term engagement or some very immediate opportunities, you need to understand what particular SDGs you want to be more focusing on and the companies or organizations who are working on that particular SDGs. That's one thing. Second is that we are also looking at this trend that a lot of philanthropic funds are going from north to south. A lot of different funding are going, and as Ambassador Blanchard has mentioned, we are tapping into the private sector fund. So you will be seeing that a lot of public-private partnerships are happening, a lot of private sector investment funds are happening. So if you want to kind of specialize on that financing field or see how this different funding mechanism works, then you definitely need to understand how the PPP framework works. PPP is the short form of public-private partnerships, and how this public-private sector investments are actually helping the development aids or can work simultaneously with the development aids to kind of work towards any particular sustainable agenda. Then those days are actually over when we are seeing that the white men are running in shorts and helping people. This is how you should be doing tasks. Things do not work in that way anymore. Now, when we are looking at the SDGs, we are looking for local solutions. We are looking for local.
We did hear that.
Okay, we're back. Okay, so that's fine. You can continue.
I'm gonna request Ambassador Blanchard to kind of take from wherever he was. You were sharing something, Ambassador.
But Ayman, you can continue, and then I'll jump in when just you finish.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much for that. So as I was saying, so people are looking for localized solutions, localized expertise, and very recently we had this Making Global Goals Local Business Canada Summit. So this is a global campaign that's happening, and this is a campaign that's run by UN Global Compact. The goals are global in nature, but we need local solutions. The goals, the way we are tackling the goals, the way we are challenging the goals, the way we are trying to come up with a solution are very much local focused. So if we do not develop those local expertise, understand those local context, there's no way we can actually solve those global goals in local context. So the country, maybe you have a particular preference of country, a particular region of preference. So wherever you want to work, please do study their environment, their political environment, their environmental environment, everything, like very well. Otherwise, you won't be able to kind of come up with your expertise in that particular field. And then, as I was mentioning about the whole advancement of technology and how that's going to change the future of work, you actually don't have any control on that. And technology is changing so vast. Every day we are looking at new technologies. Every day we are looking at new machine learning. It's changing at a rapid pace. So you can't do anything about that other than just keeping yourself to the same pace. But what will actually be very vital for you is improving the soft skills. That's the key, because technology is those soft skills that you'll be actually developing your skills on, that cannot be taken away by the technologies. So soft skills like creativity, flexibility, problem solving, adaptability, creative thinking, this is something you should start developing your expertise on and see how that can be aligned together with the machine learning, with the AI, artificial intelligence, with the technological advancement, and so all those things. I have a few other points, but I think if there is any other comments.
Ayman, I will just take it from you, the soft skills. I totally agree with the soft skills. I think you really need to be good at teamwork and breaking down the silos and leadership and all of that. But to me, it's like a T, you know. There's a part where you can be somewhat of a generalist and have a broad skill set, but you need to offer a vertical where you are a specialist,
right?
Because that's the issue. And as part of the horizontal thing that each of you interested in development need to be able to read a financial statement. Each of you need to be able to understand the basics of finance. Each of you needs to be able to understand some basics of technology. Each of you there are things that actually, you know, if you want to be successful, you can go in a you can go in a more traditional way, but I'm telling you, the traditional development sphere it's getting out of business. It's not going to be sustainable for a long time. To me, what is going to be sustainable is like when countries sit down with us. I've sat with so many leaders of emerging frontier markets in Africa with Prime Minister Trudeau. What do they ask him? You know, they say, you know, your development assistance, it's very nice, it's very good, we use it, but this is not what we're after. We're after partnerships. And we are after doing more business with you, attracting more investments. Like, for example, I'll tell you one thing that is becoming the key for the future in development is we need to be able to develop in each of the countries a minimum infrastructure and capital markets. If you have no capital markets in countries, how do you want capital to flow and be invested in that country? So this is, for those of you who are still in school, go and take as many classes in accounting and finance and some of the legal stuff as much as you can and accounting. It's very, very, very important that you have some basics, even though you don't want to be a specialist, but you have to understand that, because that will allow you, like the young people all over the world, I can tell you, are incredibly strong. The people in all countries in Africa are like, you have, we're not 50, 70 years ago. This is 2019. And so for you to bring, you have to bring a lot of value as a foreigner and as someone that will actually be a bridge maybe between the two markets, or that will take something. You need to bring something that is special. If not, fine, there will always be some space, but limited one, for some of the stuff, the traditional development work. But even that, because of technology, that is disappearing very fast. And so to me, I was the Blue Economy Conference in Kenya. Canada led the Blue Economy Conference in Kenya last year. We co-hosted that, and I made sure that it was in Nairobi, not in Canada, because I wanted us to be able to show to the world that we can partner on an equal footing and do it in Africa. And we did that with Japan, Canada, and Kenya. And there was, there were lots of skeptics in Ottawa about that. But you know what? There was 17,000 people registered for that conference. And you know what? 15 of the 17,000 were below 32 years old. Like, these are young people that are starving for entrepreneurship, for partnership, for access to technology. That's the kind of thing they're talking about at the moment in these frontier markets. And so, yes, of course, there are things that are different, like in Goma or in some corners of the world where you are in a conflict zone. It's slightly different. But most of the opportunities will be more in the kinds of things that, that Justin is doing, for example, and than the traditional stuff that you hear. And even at the UN at the moment, this morning, the Secretary General was actually presenting his budget for next year. And you know what? He said that he's put a new amount of money in the budget for training of the people that are now hired by the UN, because they don't have the right skill set that is needed to get action on the ground. It's one thing to make the agreements, to conclude the agreements like the Paris Accord and like the SDGs, but your role is about making it happen for the people on the ground. And that takes a very different skill set than it used to. And that's what you need. And I actually, with all due respect for our institutions in Canada, I'm their biggest fans, the universities, but I find that we are too traditional in our approach. And so as many classes you can take in other faculties and stuff, go and take it, because it's all, you'll need those skill set. And the training that the Secretary General was talking about this morning, for example, he was saying the resident coordinator, the person who is in charge of the development team in each country, now needs to be able to do deals with the private sector. Now needs to be able to actually understand how financing works. He needs to be, or she needs to be able to actually make sure that minimal infrastructures are being built and that sort of things. And that's very different from a skill set than what it was required 20 years ago. And so that's my comment. Yes, the soft skills. Yes, you need a broad skill set, but you also need to be specialist in something. Take me, for example, at the UN. I am trying to have a broad skill set, and where I go very deep, it's the financing for development. If you ask my colleagues at the UN, they will say to you, the Canadian ambassador, his obsession is financing for development and the role of the private sector. And that's what I've decided to specialize in. On the other hand, this morning I was in active discussion on the budget of the UN, and later on this afternoon I'll be on counterterrorism and all of that. You need to have the broad skill set, but you need to be credible and to have something to offer that is not being offered by everyone, because that's what you need to do in life, is to find your niche, your obsession. And you don't need to decide it when you're at university, and it can change once you're on the in the workforce. You have to be opportunistic about life. You know, you have to be able to see an opportunity and seize it and do it, and that will bring you. I have many examples in my career that, you know what, I never thought I would have an interest in that industry or that other industry, and you know, it's just because I had an opportunity. And then if you're just the least curious, you develop that expertise as you go. So don't feel too anxious about the fact that you don't have a specialty, or you don't have the life will bring you some mandates that will bring you in that direction, and you'll develop yourself that way.
All right, thank you very much, Ambassador. I assume that we've run out of time with you at this point.
I'll take 5 minutes.
All right. Are there does anyone from what Ambassador's now added into have any comments or thoughts that they wanted to ask about? I'll venture one other one just back to what you had said before. You mentioned that in a lot of cases, the official development assistance is no longer anywhere near the majority of the money that's needed in order to accomplish a lot of the development that's going on. That private partnerships are required, and that the banks are even getting involved. How can a young person, a youth in the sector, influence what's going on when they don't have the influence or necessarily the connections to be in the boardroom of TD Bank, or to be at the decision table where some of these considerations are being taken? Where can the young people in the room today, the young professionals starting out, where can they find the means to be the most influential and to make the most difference?
Well, it's many aspects, but you know, so you can choose whether you want to act. To me, you know, for example, you could decide that it's actually by making sure that a project in Uganda for water purification is bankable. That's one way of bringing an opportunity to the private sector somewhere in the world. That is because at the moment, a lot of these ideas are very good. The problem is they're not translated in a way that is understandable by the global financial markets. And so that's a big impediment. So anyone who can work on making the link between these two can have a lot of influence. On the other hand, you can also have a lot of influence we need to make sure that our pension funds in Canada understand that, yes, they have a fiduciary duty to the pensioners that want to have a pension once they're retired, but also we want to make sure that we have a world in which we can, a sustainable world that we can retire on. So I say we have to put the fire under the seat of some of these pension funds to make sure that they invest, they align their capital way more with sustainable development than they do now. And, you know, like a lot of people, when I make those speeches in front of banks and pension funds, they say to me, Marc-André, you want us to play the role of government? I say, listen, in our society, we decided to give the money to you. We decided as a society that the money was better managed by the private sector than by the government. There's another country called China that didn't make that decision. And they are doing things and seeing and playing a role and actually developing a world that is very different than what we aspire to. And that's one thing. And the other thing is that the challenges that we're facing as a world are systemic. and none of us are shelved from the impact of all of this. I mean, like, you know, the issue of the migration issue in Canada that we've heard about a year and a half ago in Roxon Road in Quebec, you know, the people that were crossing from the US into Quebec, there's a few thousand people that went there. The last few thousand people that crossed there were Nigerians fleeing a drought in northern Nigeria. So imagine if climate change, as you know, if it develops as what we fear, then imagine just the migration aspect of it, and where all of the instability that will cause all over the world. So the people who have money now need to understand that they cannot just ignore this and just maximize profitability or returns to shareholders. And there's a lot of good things in our pension funds in Canada are some of the leading pension funds in the world on this, on being able to invest responsibly. Some may say it's a low bar, but they're ahead. So, but we just need to help them, push them. So that's one other aspect where young people could get involved. And then, because you could look at it from the mobilization point of view, or you go and help in a very specific situation, or you go and help you know, I really believe in the education piece. I really believe that Canada, one of the things that we do very well is education, partially our research and colleges, and our research institutions and university institutions and our colleges. And so the vocational training, we need to actually, that is a way of actually being involved in a way that could be relevant. The fintech side, I mean, like, there's many sides. So to me, I actually believe it's a world of opportunities way bigger than it was 10 years ago for people interested in development. You just need to look at it differently, not in a traditional way. I actually believe that you're in a business that if you understand the world, if you understand some regions of the world well, if you can talk the language, and if you are able to actually make partnerships that can be made workable there, and you get the social license for the projects that you're interested in happen, this is, it's a gold mine of opportunities and the future for all of you.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you for the uplifting ideas and the suggestions there. I appreciate the time that you've given us and going beyond the time that we'd originally planned. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks to all of you, and I wish you all the best. And I always say that I'm the most privileged man on the planet because I represent the best country at the United Nations, and you should all be proud of being Canadian. But please, because Canada is such a great country, we all need to be audacious and ambitious. And that's the message I want to convey to you this afternoon is don't accept the status quo. Push us to be more ambitious and audacious, because that's the only way we're going to remain as great as we are at the moment. So thank you very much, and have a good afternoon. Thanks for asking me to contribute. Thank you very much.
Thank you, you too.